So it is true. We actually have some good news, but I don't want you to be fooled by all these headlines, all these big reports that are coming out. Because yes, we have been hearing bad news after bad news for months. Finally, we're starting to see some more welcoming news. And so, what is the good news? Well, I will get to that in just a moment. But first, if you appreciate all the work that I do to keep you up to date and informed on all the latest news and updates, could you do me a favor? Go ahead and smash that like button and don't forget to subscribe. But let's get right down to it. What is the good news? Because we've been hearing bad news after bad news, but again, what is the good news? Well, the good news is that very soon we are going to see inflation drop. And inflation is going to drop hard. I'm not talking about seeing inflation dropping by 0.1 or 0.2%. Those aren't the declines that we're gonna see. Some economists are now saying that we are gonna see inflation drop by almost a full percentage point. But why? What are the major factors here? What should we be looking at? And what are people going to be shown? And how are they going to be fooled? Well, that's what I want to address. Because again, we're going to see the big headline numbers. Inflation falling. Inflation plummets. Inflation big declines. We're going to see those. I may even post some videos about big declines of inflation. So just a warning. But I will also give you the warnings behind it. What else are we going to see? Well, here's the big factor. The big factor as to why economists believe that inflation is going to fall and fall hard is because of rents. Rents are in shelter. Shelter currently makes up more than a third of our CPI report. The third of the weight. So that's a substantial amount of weight that just shelter holds. And it's because of this that even the smallest drop in rents are going to cause inflation to fall. And that is why I am adamant that we are going to see inflation fall, but at the same time as it falls, we're going to see some other numbers, okay? And this is where things get very tricky. Now, the second reason why economists believe inflation is going to fall hard is because of consumer spending. You may have already seen this with your own spending. I have seen it with mine. But in recent months, we have been seeing a major shift away from physical goods and towards services. I talked about this earlier on today where I said, I could go and buy a scarifier or something like that, something to pull up the thatch and grass. Or I could just go hire somebody to do it. And somebody even put in the comments, well, yeah, you could go and buy the machine for a quarter of what it's going to cost me to have somebody come and do it for me, or I could go and again buy that machine, but then I got to house the machine. I obviously have to use it myself. Do I have time to do it, or could I just pay somebody else to do it? Somebody brought that up, and again, that's an excellent point, because yes, I could pay somebody to do a job, but if I have the time, I have the equipment to do it myself, why wouldn't I just do it, right? That's what we're starting to see, is people are moving away from physical goods and just going to services, which usually means that either they don't have the equipment, or they don't have the time, or they don't have the know-how. Those are the three things. Now, we are also starting to see a little bit of a slowdown in services. We've seen a shift from physical goods to services. Now we're starting to see the slowdown from services to people are just not paying for things. This is another sign that consumers are attempting to either save money, which again, we'll have those reports soon, or we don't have any money, and so we cannot spend it. That's part of the problem. But I don't want you to be fooled by these numbers, because we are going to see inflation drop. We know this. And even though rent will fall, and again, what is the biggest expense we have as Americans? Well, really, it doesn't matter where you live in the world. What is your biggest expense? For most people, it is housing. It is their rent. It is their mortgage. It is where they lay their head at night. That is their biggest expense. Well, guess what? Even though we're going to see rents fall, we're also expecting to see energy costs increase. This is actually due to the recent announcement from OPEC Plus that they're going to be cutting production by 1.2 billion or 1.6 million barrels of oil per day. That's substantial. Now, with the rising energy costs, this will also increase the cost of food. It's going to increase the cost of transportation. It will increase the cost of farming and so much more. Now, with that said, here's some of the other news. And again, I try to give you both sides of every story, but many CEOs are actually pretty cautious right now to say that inflation is going down. Even though we see it, the writing's on the wall, just the reports that we're getting, it's an indication that inflation's going to go down. But some believe that inflation could turn around if the Federal Reserve doesn't actually commit to lowering inflation and continue to raise rates. But again, if it doesn't drop and it could turn around and head right back up, if the Fed decides to raise rates one more time and then pause or then lower rates. If we see the Federal Reserve decide to U-turn and lower rates, that could be a major problem, because if we lower rates, businesses would see that, okay, it's probably getting to that point where we should reinvest, we should spend. Consumers, especially those that are looking to buy a home or possibly buy a car, they would be looking at this kind of turn, be like, okay, well, I see rates are coming down. We should probably jump in before it's too late. And if we do that, again, what we're going to see inflation is we're going to actually have upward pressure on inflation, because the U.S. consumer would start to spend money. That is, if we have the money. If we don't have any money saved up, if we have just so much debt, then possibly we don't spend anything. But again, it all comes down to the Fed. The Federal Reserve is going to decide whether or not they're going to raise rates one more time by 25 basis points. Are they going to go even higher, maybe 50, 75 basis points? We don't know. Are they going to pause interest rate hikes? Or are we going to see them turn around and actually lower rates? These are all things that we need to be well aware of. And this is why I bring this up, is because this is something that is actually considered good news, is that inflation is going to go down. The only problem is it going to go down indefinitely, or is it going to go down temporarily for a month or two, and then the Fed U-turns and we see inflation go back up? That is something that we don't know, and it's very hard to speculate because we have no clue what the Federal Reserve is about to do. But I wanted to fill you in on what this good news is, because again, you're going to see the headlines. Inflation plummets. Inflation drops, massively. Huge decline. You're going to see all these big headlines, big flashy words, and they're going to tell you that, hey, it's looking good. Inflation's going down. Now might be the time to start spending. But again, I don't want you to be fooled, because inflation's going to go down because of rents. That's why inflation's going to go down. Rents and consumers tired of spending more money than they actually have is going to push inflation down. What's actually going to keep it somewhat elevated or turn it around is energy costs, food. These are things that are going to push inflation back up. Okay? So, if you have any questions here, please ask your questions down in the comment section below. Again, thank you guys for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Consider subscribing. I'll see you guys on the next one.